best long con you ever pulled. Story 1: I'm probably late to the party, but here goes. In high school, I was a counselor at a summer camp for elementary school kids, ages 7 to 10. Now, this con only lasted 3 weeks, but remember, 3 weeks is an eternity to kids that age. One day, about 4 days in a camp, a kid of about 8 walked up to me holding a huge feather, like from a hawk or something. He was all excited and proud, but for some reason, my immediate reaction was to go, "Oh no, where did you find that? That a feather from the yellow-bellied lake loon? Oh man, does this mean it's back?" Now the kid, for a part, was immediately skeptical. It's just a feather from a big well." At that moment, my buddy Derek walked up, oblivious to the situation. The kid shows him the feather, and for reasons known only to Jeeba, says, "Oh no, where did you find that? Like, just absolutely amazing." The kid absolutely freaks, drops the feather, and runs off. I fill Derek in on what happened, and we laugh about it. Thinking it's over later, we're in the dorms, and the kid walks up with a few older kids, demanding we tell them about the loon. We concoct this story of a giant, yellow-bellied lake loon that was notorious for stealing campers from the lakeshore and sometimes their bunks. Another counselor, Daniel, is working behind the dorms, and hears our tale. The older kids don't believe and question him about it as they go outside, having heard the legend of the loon without their knowledge. He confirms every grisly detail, thereby sealing it as fact. Before supper, it had spread throughout the camp, all through the boys' and girls' dorms. Amazingness. Kids would take turns keeping lookout during swim time, and it became an easy way to scare them into submission at bedtime. Well, we keep this going until there are 3 days left in camp. Another counselor, Jeremy, had to be back at his summer job early the next morning. So we hatched a plan. I left and drove to my parents about an hour away and retrieved this ginormous stuffed lobster. I had one at the fair. Going MacGyver with sheets, the lobster, and costume stuff from the camp. We dressed me up like a giant M67 yellow-bellied lake loon. At around 5 the next morning, when Jeremy had to leave camp, I burst into the boys' dorm, cawing and flapping my wings. I attacked Jeremy in his bed, dragging him out of the dorm, him screaming all the while. There was mother, pandemonium, kids were screaming, crying, terrified. Meanwhile, Jeremy got in his car and drove home, never to be seen by the campers again. We got most of them settled down, but not all. About 6 kids were so freaked their parents came and scooped them early. We never admitted to the parents that we knew anything about it, and never assured the campers that it was just a prank and that Jeremy was all right. TLDR, somewhere in this world, there is a 23 to 26-year-old with a debilitating fear of birds, and ID, do it all again. Edit, my first Reddit gold. Thanks, stranger. You have bought yourself some premium loon protection, an important thing to have during these late days of summer. Edit 2 for UDP80 down below, and the multiple folks PMing me to tell me I'm full of "I don't really care if internet strangers think I'm a liar." But to stop the PMs, I dug up this short exchange between myself and a fellow counselor who now runs the camp from back in 2010, short of tracking down one of the kids. That's the best proof I got. Story 2: for months as a child, I systematically conditioned my younger brother to think it was cool to have a super small penis. ID insult him by saying his was so big, and ID brag, saying mine was so small. It all paid off one day when I had friends over and we did something that made him super angry. He screamed at me, "You're so big you gotta roll it up and stick in a backpack." I just stood there and enjoyed the feeling of complete and utter success. The look on my friends' faces was priceless. Best moment ever. Story 3. So a coworker of mine liked to play little daily pranks as he would pass my desk, flip over my mouse, turn off my monitor, the usual little things, nothing malicious, but I warned him that I hit back hard. As April rolled around, I decided it was time to teach him the consequences. Acquiring a few of the Annoyatrons from ThinkGeek was step 1. For those of you who don't know, the Annoyatrons are a little battery-powered circuit board with a magnet that beep at random intervals. Then it was just a matter of waiting for him to step away. Now a normal human being would have hidden the devices in his cube, waited until he came back and laughed at his confusion when the beeping started to bug him. Instead, I grabbed his keys and stepped out to his car, hiding the device under his steering column. I then locked the door, returned his keys, and went back to work, at which point I promptly forgot about it and waited to see if he would react. 4 months later, I finally casually mentioned to another coworker, who is a closer friend of the victim, if said victim had mentioned anything about a beeping coming from his car. The guy's eyes went huge and said, "What do you know about that?" As it turns out, the two of them had recently spent 8 hours on a road trip to a ski resort with the beeping driving them nuts the whole way. The victim had taken the car to the dealership twice to try and locate the source of the beeping and was strongly considering selling the car. Now a normal human being would have at this point copped to what he had done and gotten a laugh. Instead, I took his friend into my confidence, explained what I had done, and then recruited said friend to help me sneak back out to his car Change the battery on the device, it was getting kind of low, and then add the second device, this time with a different tone, inside the door well of his driver's side door. Again, about 2 months later by this point, I had told practically the entire company about this gag, who managed to keep the secret largely due to his reputation as a prankster. His friend, we had been watching him to make sure he hadn't decided to sell the car, and finally came to me and told me he was about to go drop a few $100 on an analyzer to see what could be causing the beeping. Now, with something built up this long, I couldn't just walk up and explain what I'd done. Again, we waited again for him to leave his desk and snag his keys. Recovering the devices, we hid them inside his cube walls and waited. When he returned, he heard the beeps. Immediately, he jumps up and yells, "There it is. That's the beeping that's been going on in my car." His friend, in a level of acting that deserved an Oscar, managed to straight face say, "Hey, maybe it's a low battery warning in your key fob." The victim, having one of those switchblade keys with the remote, unlocked the look of pure joy in this guy's face at possibly having solved his now half-a-year dilemma, would have made the whole enterprise worth it. But then, through the company I sent him a link to the Annoyatron. After opening the link, he had a moment of confusion, wondering why I had sent him the link. He even commented, "Yeah, I've seen those before." I smiled. The series of emotions that crossed his face when it dawned on him will warm my blackened heart for as long as I draw breath. But the best part was when he realized his best friend, who he had been coming to try to find a solution, was in on it. The rest of the day was filled with people who had known about it yelling beep as he passed. TLDR, I hid an Annoyatron in a coworker's car and left it there for 6 months, only revealing it as he was nearly ready to sell the car. Edit, wow, thanks for the gold. Story 4. I had a roommate a couple years ago that was notoriously terrible at saving his money. He was in really bad debt and sinking further and further into financial ruin. He was also my best friend, so I wanted to help. I had tried giving him a budget, holding on to his money, and even lying to him about where I was going so he wouldn't come to the bars and spend more. He was terribly embarrassed and hid his debt from everyone, but I knew, for the 3 years we lived together, I lied to him about the amount of rent and the price of utilities. I would take the extra money and send it to his mom. His mom would then use that money to pay off his multiple credit cards. He was so humiliated about his debt, he wouldn't have his credit card statements sent to our place and had them sent to his mom's instead. He never thought she opened them. While he thought he was just racking up interest by avoiding his bills, they were actually being paid every month by him, me, and his mom. Didn't knock out his debt completely, but we did a pretty good job of taking care of most of it. Edit, since so many people are asking. He made a lot of stupid financial decisions during college, the most obvious being that he treated credit cards as if they weren't his money. He had gotten to the point where he thought his debt was inescapable and he couldn't see a way out, so he stopped paying. I just wanted to help him by shaving off some of that outstanding balance so that he could possibly see the light at the end of the tunnel. I know it was pretty dumb, but I was young and truly had the best intentions. He was pretty pissed when he found out. His mom ended up sitting him down to explain that he could feasibly pay some of his balance every month while still making rent, because he had been doing just that. Story 5. I convinced a friend that if you wave at a koala for long enough, it will wave back. ID, actually forgotten that I convinced her of this until she sent me an angry text saying that she'd been to the zoo with her family. Proudly told them this fact and begun waving. They all laughed at her. I called her and laughed too. Story 6. One day, in college, I showed up at some friend's house to meet them, and they all weren't there, but the door was unlocked. Annoyed, I walked in and wrote, "You'll never know what I took" on their kitchen whiteboard and walked back out. I forgot all about it. Must have been a year later they were talking about that they lost in the robbery. I asked them what they were talking about, and they mentioned the note on the whiteboard. Apparently, they had been blaming the disappearance of around their house on it the whole year. One guy even claimed his iPod was stolen. Story 7. In the Army, a dude in my squad once convinced most of our unit that we were slotted to return to our home base a month ahead of time. The con started with him with another platoon. Soon it spread to the entire company, and then it was battalion-wide. It got to the point where platoon sergeants believed it. The best part, he totally forgot that he started the rumor and got pissed when it was addressed a couple of weeks before the supposed departure. After a bit of piecing the game of telephone together, he realized that he was pissed about himself. Story 8. We had these omelet crispers in my freezer one time. Microwavable bread pockets filled with egg and cheese like Hot Pockets. But the breading was soggy and tasted gross. Anyway, there was one left, and just with my brother, I ate it and said how delicious it was, even though it was disgusting. After a few bites of pure bliss, as he thought it was, he asked for a bite to try it. Of course, I refused, as it was fantastic. He kept asking for a bite, and I kept refusing. This turned into a chase around the house, me eating it all along. Finally, I finished it without him having gotten a taste. He says he doesn't care, it's whatever, yada yada. For a few days, I mention it to our parents when he's nearby, but doesn't think I know he can hear. saying how good it was. He can't get out of his head how great this sounds. Finally, after a week, he goes out and buys a box. He gets home and immediately begins to heat one up. He's gloating the whole time about how I won't get a single one. They're all his, blah, blah. The whole time, I'm looking disappointed while I'm really trying not to burst out laughing. It finishes, he takes a bit, and I swear I can see his face go green. He practically vomits in the sink while I struggle to breath from laughing so hard. Dumb. Yes. Worth it, very. Story 9. It's a 6-year con. I convinced my best friend's girlfriend that I was studying abroad here from the Philippines. I met her our freshman year when my friend and I were roommates in the dorms. My friend knew I had a really good Filipino accent, so he planned this whole prank of me talking to his girl with my accent, and we came up with this whole story of how I came from this poor village and am here to study in America for better opportunities. It was supposed to be a one-time prank, but we kept it going for no other reason other than we thought it was funny. She eventually caught me speaking regularly about 2 years into it, and my friend was able to convince her that I worked on my accent so that it wouldn't hinder me when I look for jobs. It's been 6 years now, and they're engaged, going to be married next year. We still haven't told her. It's not even that funny anymore, but neither of us know how to break it to her, so we're sticking with it. Edit, yo. Some of you aren't reading the second paragraph. She caught me speaking in a normal American accent, but we made her believe it was because I worked on my English. I don't speak in front of her with the accent anymore, but she still believes him from the Philippines. Here is how we keep the joke going. 1. Sometimes I mispronounce big words just to make her think there's some words I don't know how to pronounce correctly, and then I ask her to help me say it correctly. LOL. 2. I can speak some Tagalog, so whenever my family calls, I make sure to have the phone conversation within hearing distance. My family is in on the joke, so when they call, I just say the magic words. My friend's name and his fiance's name are here with me, so they know we'll be throwing in some Tagalog phrases in our conversation. 3. Whenever our friends want to play along, they'll ask me how to say something in Tagalog in front of her, and they'll make up a phrase. I'm not fluent, so a lot of the time, I just string random words together. It's really hard not to laugh when we do this because we all know what I'm saying is bullshit. For one time, we made her believe that my visa expired and that I was here illegally, and I had to keep a low profile so I wouldn't get deported. My friend used that as an excuse to hang out with me, and the guys more, because IJustco needs us guys to keep him company. He doesn't go out much because he's afraid something will happen and he'll get deported. Story 10. I got revenge on my neighbor for TPing my place. He doesn't lock his house, so for 2 years I pooped in his toilet and never flushed. I would do things to alter my deposits, like eating a load of corn or peanuts before, just so he would look at it the next day like, I don't remember eating corn. When I finally confessed, he was so relieved. Thought he had been sleep pooping and was seriously considering seeing a doctor. His response, I always flush. He admitted to wondering why he was buying more toilet paper than usual. He waited 2 years for me to retaliate, not realizing that I was retaliating the whole time. Could have used all that toilet paper you wasted on my house. Edit, yes, I posted this same one like a year ago or something. Story 11. My dad made up a fictional person where he works 11 years ago. He will occasionally call him over the PA system and watch as everyone gets confused about who this guy is. The funniest part is that this guy has worked there for 11 years and nobody knows who he is. Edit, wow. So many upvotes. Thank you, kind Redditor, for the gold. It is much appreciated. Unfortunately, I cannot say the name of this fictional guy for fear of someone recognizing the name. Then the jig is up, and my dad will be one sad guy. Also, for those who think he works from home or in a small place, he doesn't. He works at a power plant. Story 12. My group of friends, and I have convinced at least 5 people so far that Made in Manhattan was written by Quentin Tarantino and directed by him as well. Usually after a while they watch it, or have even had friends over to watch it, and the con ends. Though one guy who did work for a major advertising agency told his creative director, who's a film buff, that his favorite movie by Quentin was Made in Manhattan. He thought this offhand movie knowledge would impress him, and got asked to leave the meeting to think about what he had done. Story 13. I was over at a buddy's place, and something he did pissed me off. Can't even remember what it was, so I decided to draw penises painty on everything around me. They were stealth penis doodles. Every time he would walk away to get something, I would pencil graffiti a penis somewhere on the TV remote, on a paper plate halfway down the stack of plates, on the inside lid of his toolbox, underneath the table, on the inside of his hard hat, on the back of a picture on the wall, on the inside of a cabinet door, anywhere I could hide a penis sketch. As many as I could. He figured it out eventually. The best part was his reaction every time he'd find another penis doodle. It's been 4 years. He's since moved, and I still get calls from him every so often. Hey, I found another. Story 14. I convinced my friend that penguins could fly. I backed it up with a video that did for an April Fool's one year. A couple months later, I heard him telling a friend, and oh, trust me, some species can fly. This is my one story Reddit seems most familiar with. Had a coworker who made our job miserable. Her job title was secretary, but we joked that it was internet quality control. In general, she was selfish and childish, which we all were, but looked down at us and went to the boss crying when we joked back and retort to jokes like her own. She was a stick-skin, snobbish blonde, know-it-all. The straw for me was early on in my employment. My aunt sent me a large jar filled with various candy as a congratulations. We went on a video shoot and came back a few hours later to find she had single-handedly eaten nearly half the jar. Later that week, she ate a half-dozen donuts I brought in. Our long con was developed shortly after discussing my frustrations with the others on the creative team. What if we posed there was always candy in the jar? What if donuts around our office was a regular thing? We committed to making her fat by means of a strategic campaign wherein we all brought junk food and bags of individually wrapped candies specifically for her consumption. In 6 months, she had put on at least 30 pounds and required a whole new wardrobe. And while 10 years later, I don't feel as beamingly proud of the whole thing as I did then. At the time, it was a badge of honor. Story 15, I convinced a police department that I am psychic, so I wouldn't be a suspect in a robbery. Only a few people know. I now work as a consultant for the police department with my best friend. It's been about 7 years. Story 16, at the fast food place I worked at, I had a running one where the light switches for the bathrooms were in the main dining room. So every time a new person would start, I would tell them the lights were clappers. They would go in there and clap to try it out, and I would just flick them off and on. Usually they would catch on after 2 to 3 shifts, though. Well, we had one person who I was able to have her believe it for about a month and a half. She would even clap, and I would be away from the switches and would come out of the bathroom to ask if the clappers were broken, and I would have her try it again and just flickered the lights. I was a little bored there sometimes. Story 17, this may be more of a long-lasting joke than a long-lasting con. So, I apologize ahead of time if this doesn't quite fit the criteria. One time, while I was in a phone store waiting to be helped, I picked up one of the display phones that they have lying around there. I had the brilliant idea to text one of my friends at the time some obscene and ridiculous text message from this unknown number. Let's call this friend Sam. Anyways, I think the message was something along the lines of piss in my you. Just as I hit send, the woman behind the counter calls me up, and I go about my business the rest of the day, instantly forgetting all about this little prank I pulled. Fast forward 7 to 8 months down the road. Me and a group of my friends are all hanging out, just shooting in the wind. Out of nowhere, Sam looks down at his phone and lets out an ARRHWTF. Leave me alone, everyone, including me, is confused as by this. So I ask Sam what's up. Sam jumps into this whole explanation about how this has been texting him perverted and disgusting things for 8 months now. And every time Sam would ask who it was, the response would be absurd, if anything at all. He goes, dude, it started 8 months ago when I got a text from this unknown number telling me to in his or her. And then they call me. That it was at that moment right there when I remembered the one little text I decided to send Sam while waiting at the phone store. Then the realization that for 8 months people were walking into that store, rifling through display phones, searching through pictures and text messages only to find this initial message of "in my you." Now they're sitting there with this phone in their hand as their mind begins to turn as they decide what the next text message to this unsuspecting soul should be. That was a great day. Story 18, in high school, I had a teacher who had us read long passages of geography books and outline important information, then put it in our own words. We found out that he never read anything past the first page. I guess he was pretty lazy. So I would just do the first page of the 15-page assignment, then the rest would be a part of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He never caught me. Story 19, I rented this inner-city apartment from this lawyer scumbag in 1980s. The windows were on the alley, right above the dumpsters, and it was winter. Not being a noob, I asked about air conditioning, as dumpster stench will prevent you from opening your window on hot days. Come summer, the air doesn't work. I call him, and he says in the most lawyer-like way. I pointed out the air conditioner. I never said it worked. I held back rent. But he took me to court, which I avoided by just paying up till the lease was over in pissed off defeat. But I had his home phone number. I waited 2 years until one beautiful Friday afternoon in spring. Around 3 o'clock, I called his trophy wife and informed her that her husband had better stop my wife, or I was going to beat both of them with a baseball bat. She was most interested and pissed, and I knew enough about the guy to satisfy the grilling she gave me. I bet he had one shitty weekend. Story 20, my older brother told my little brother about 5 at the time that humans didn't originate on planet Earth, that we had to abandon our planet because our star was going supernova and we lost our technology in the process. Very unoriginal sci-fi plot. But the kid was 5, so he was somewhat suspicious but still willing to believe. He came to me to ask for confirmation because I wasn't the type of person to try to trick him. I was going to tell him it was bullshit, but thought it might be funny, so I told him it was true and forgot about it. When my little bro was 16, he told us that he believed that for years and convinced a bunch of his school friends it was true. He was pissed. It was hilarious. Story 21, I was loaned out to a department to help manage their failing project from day one. It was a disaster. The guy in charge was a typical boss on the managers that reported for him, stroke his ego, and that seemed to be their only skill they couldn't organize for, were verbally abusive to their staff, were technically ignorant. I could go on, but that's not the point of the story. So, of course, anytime I'm out with my buddies, inventing about this crappy situation, I can't wait for it to be over so I can get back to my actual department. At one point, though, after about 2 months, the guy in charge comes in to chat about the latest dumpster fire on the project. I remember him using the exact words I had used when describing the situation to my buddies. I thought it was odd, and at first I chalked it up to coincidence, but later that night I reconsidered the wording I had used and that the guy in charge had also used was just really quirky and unique. I didn't fully believe that anyone was ratting me out, but just to be sure, I decided it wouldn't hurt anything to be cautious. So I decided to temporarily pare down the people I discussed my situation with to just my trusted few, 4 friends that I knew would never gossip. Then it happened again. About a month later, the boss' son was back to discuss his latest. And again, he used the exact same wording I had used when ID talked to my friends. One of my trusted friends was betraying me. I was devastated. I went through all of the stages of grief, shock, denial, anger, depression, bargaining, and finally acceptance. I'm sure I missed a few stages. It took about 2 weeks to fully recover. Once I got over my grief, I was stuck with the problem of how to catch the one responsible. After all, it was easy enough to pare down the people I was sort of friends with and just not bring up the subject when I was hanging out with them. But these are my best friends. I couldn't just stop talking to every one of my friends because one of them was a backstabber. I decided to set a canary trap. I detail each one of them a different story, but make each story very memorable and funny so that whoever was the gossip would feel compelled to tell this story. The silver lining in all this was I wasn't lying to anyone. The project was such a clusterfuck. I had my choice of juicy stories to pick from. Once ID weeded out the culprit, I could fill in the other 3 on all the details. I decided to start with my most trusted confidant, Jenny. I told Jenny a story about my project manager's latest. I picked Jenny because I knew it wasn't her, and I wanted to see if I could actually go through with it before I tried it with anyone else. Long story short, it was Jenny. I was heartbroken. Jenny and I shared an office for 2 years. ID been an usher at her wedding. We'd shared so many ups and downs over the years. I cried when I got home from work. I had to go through another 2-week cycle of grief. After 2 weeks, though, I was ready. I had some damage control to do. I invited Jenny out to lunch and painted a rosy picture for her. That project manager, I was skeptical at first, but it seems like he's really getting it. The client, they're really starting to get it together, too. It's really fun to go to work. About 2 weeks later, I invited her out to lunch again. Gave her the same snow job. Everything was really looking up. The sky is blue. It was rocky at first, but it's all coming together. It wasn't. Then I cut Jenny off until I needed her. About 6 months later, I called her up and asked her to lunch again. I told her how I was weighing a new offer from another company and that I'd love to stay put, but I needed a substantial raise to do it. 2 weeks later, I got a 9 raise. There never was another company. Jenny, you broke my heart, but in the end, you helped me more than you'll ever know. Story 22, my brother conned me out of months of allowance by setting up a communal fish fund, which was meant to pay for fish food or the pet stuff. So we'd both put half our allowance money in each week, but I didn't notice for almost a year that not all the money was going to our pet fish. He was fudging the books. Story 23 TLDR, coworker, and I convinced another coworker that bacon comes from the tail of an animal called the tobacco. Tears ensued. Years ago, when I worked at Jimmy John's, I was the day shift manager, and a guy, let's call him Rob, was the night shift manager. We were the oldest of the crew, working there for supplemental income, but most of our staff were high school students. One day, as I'm closing out the shift, I overhear a conversation out on the line. This sweet, naive girl, let's call her Jenny, asked Rob what animal bacon comes from. Yep. Rob asks, are you serious? You really don't know. Jenny insists she does not know. Rob, without missing a beat, says, it comes from the tail of an animal called tobacco. What's that? Asks Jenny, bewildered but not suspicious. Rob goes on to describe an animal with the body of a cow, the head of a goat, and human hands as feet. The tail, of course, is made of delicious bacon. Jenny can't visualize it, so she asks Rob to draw one. This is what he drew. Jenny then says, oh, I know those. I saw one at a petting zoo when I was little. I, still in the back, am speechless at this. I'm stifling laughter to the best of my ability. I finish counting down the AM shift cash and return to the front to leave. Jenny, apparently trusting that I wouldn't lead her stray, asks me, do you know what animal bacon comes from? Of course, I say, looking at her like she's a crazy. Everybody knows bacon comes from tobacco. It's the tail. Well, apparently that was vetted enough for her, because she was totally sold. A few minutes pass. The store is quiet mid-shift, and Jenny is toying idly with a piece of bacon on the cold table. She speaks up finally and says, "Don't you think it's sad that the bacco has to go through life without its tail, just so we can eat bacon?" Rob gets a pained look on his face and says, "Ginny, they don't live without their tails." Ginny looks horrified. The red lines on the bacon are the arteries. They die of blood loss. Tears start welling up in her eyes. "We're killing them," she asks. "Well, yeah," Rob replies, "that's what they're bred for, but what do we do with the rest of the bacco?" she asks. Rob replies, "Nothing, just goes to waste. It's not good for anything. The meat is tough and the skin is too rough." That was all her poor little brain could take. She bursts into tears. I leave because I cannot keep my laughter in any longer, and I don't want to deprive Rob of control of his masterpiece. The next day, when Rob and Ginny come in for the evening shift, Ginny is furious, apparently. She went to school and started campaigning against the horrible abuse the poor, innocent bacco has to endure just so we can eat their tails. Did I mention she was a senior in high school? Yeah, she was a bit pissed at us. I, however, have never laughed so hard in my entire life. It's been 8 years since that happened, and it still does not cease to amaze. Story 24. I got migraines a few times during my teenage years. They only happened maybe 3 to 5 times and then went away, never to return. I'm 28 and haven't had one in 13 years. However, the very fact that I had them in the past meant that I could milk it a little bit and pretend I was having an episode, so my mom would let me stay home from school. Usually this trick was saved for days when assignments were due. However, one day I didn't feel like going in because I'd been up on bash or till 2 a.m. So I put on the usual act and Mom let me stay home from school. The next day, I still didn't like the idea of going to class, so the migraine continued, and the next day and the next, for 2 whole weeks. The reason I finally gave up, apparently my teachers have been really concerned about my weeks-long absence and sent me a get well card that was signed by all the kids in my grade. There was a note saying how much everyone missed me and how my name had been mentioned at morning assembly, where the whole school had prayed for me. I was the unpopular nerdy library kid. WTF? I felt so guilty. I went into class the next day, writing this out and beginning to wonder if that was their ploy all along. Oh. Story 25. I have told someone who is sort of annoying to look up this video on YouTube called the Purple Sock Video. It doesn't exist. I know that it sounds really stupid, but he will continually lie about what he has or hasn't done. So I told him to look this video up that doesn't exist because it is really funny. It's supposed to just have a ton of different animals that are attacking a sock. I don't know why. That's just the type of humor that he likes. So what I want to see him do is say that he has watched it just to prove that all he wants to do is fit in with me. So far, it has been around 6 or 7 months. He has said that he has watched it 5 times and still does not realize that it doesn't exist. Story 26. I've convinced my kids that I'm the Pirate King. It was never meant to be serious, but it is to them. They think that I really am the king of the pirates. I wonder how long it will last. Story 27. I was in junior high school band for 5 years and never learned to read sheet music. I play trombone, so it was pretty easy to fake. There's 7 positions, and I would just write the positions above every note. If I got lost during a song, I could just peek over and see what my fellow tromboners were doing. Needless to say, band was a pretty big waste of time for me, but I got all as in BS. Story 28. This one is really dumb, but still in the works. I've always loved colloquial phrases, e.g., there's more than one way to skin a cat, and decided to bring up my son using one that I've made up. My wife and I decided that the phrase, "it's like basil on the front porch," is just vague and innocuous enough that if we use it consistently, he will make up and adopt a meaning for it. I've told several coworkers and friends about it, and it gets used ironically in conversation when we feel that it fits, so it actually gets more use than I expected. The end goal is to have my son use it casually around future schoolmates. Think Ron Burgundy trying to wrap his head around when in Rome, but in reverse, I secretly hope it takes off in my area. Edit extra word either.